Hi, my name is Mitchell Mason, and my project is creating a railing for an automated CPR device. Paramedics use an automated chest compression device when they treat patients in need of CPR. However, paramedic protocol causes difficulty in transporting patients when they're connected to the compression device. Because of this, paramedics have to regularly switch from automated CPR to manual CPR, which is much less efficient. Paramedics are having difficulty providing aid to patients in need of consistent CPR during transport from emergency scene to transport vehicle and from vehicle to the hospital. That means that the CPR that the paramedics are giving the patient is being disrupted when the CPR device has to be removed during the transport. So we found 4 different sources from 3 areas of study to validate that this is a problem we're solving. Those 3 areas of study are health and medical, legal, and education. So the first source is health and medical. It is from an experiment analysis paper from a team of scientists. They analyzed their data from their experiment. So in their experiment, they had 50 different scenarios in which CPR is needed in an emergency scenario. So basically, it was a control group of 26 EMS officials, so they were the manual CPR. Of that group, it was 13 paramedics and 13 EMTs versus the one Lucas device, which was the automated CPR. In 48 out of 50 tests, or 96%, the Lucas device was favored over manual CPR. In a quote from their analysis paper, they wrote, "In our simulation, Lucas has had a higher rate of adequate compressions and decreased total hands-on time as compared to manual CPR." So the second article is a legal article. It's from the FDA saying that the Lucas chest compression device is okayed by the FDA, saying it is liable and safe for mass manufacturing and distribution. It details the difference between the first and second model. The first model was not okayed by the Lucas device. So the article focuses on what the changes were between the first and second versions of the device. The third article is an example of when 2 EMTs were fired because they failed to save a man from cardiac arrest. They were using new medical equipment on the patient, and it brought up a big issue about liability for EMTs and for medical equipment because it was undetermined whether the 2 EMTs misused the medical equipment or if the medical equipment failed to work properly and save the man's life. The fourth and final article we found is an article in the educational area. It is explaining that right now in the United States is a big time where heart attacks and cardiac arrests are killing the majority of people. That just goes to show that these new devices are needed and are being used. So if we can figure out a way to adapt one to make it even easier to use, it will be used by paramedics in the field and can be utilized to save lives. When beginning this project, we had already decided on using the Lucas compression device as our main centerpiece of the project, but then we had to move forward. We had to make sure that we didn't skip over a better compression device that was more suitable for our project, so we went out and found some existing solutions. So those existing solutions are the 3 most used compression device from across the United States, the auto-pulse resuscitation system, the Lucas compression device, and the ROSCU miniature compression device. So we listed pros and cons of each of the 3 different compression devices. Starting with the auto-pulse resuscitation system, the bonuses or the pros is that it's cheap and lightweight, so it's available for most departments, almost all of the EMS or fire departments or first responders across the United States. Very cheap. It's lightweight. It's not going to be a big hassle to carry it out from the ambulance or the fire truck. Cons: it provides poor chest compressions, so not as high value chest compressions. It has also a higher risk of further injury to the patient. So when you're doing chest compressions, whether it's manual or automatic, the oftentimes when you're putting so much force on the chest cavity, that ribs are sometimes snap. This has a much higher risk of breaking ribs when giving the compressions. And then in addition to that, it is used less than the other two. For the next one, it is also small and easy for storage, lightweight as well. Again, it's cheap, which, not always the best. It is readily available for almost every single department across the US, but it is less mobile. It requires cords to plug into. It doesn't have its own battery that it runs off of. It also has less efficient compressions, and again, compared to the last one, it is still rarely used. So the last one is the Lucas compression device. It is the most used and most reliable, and it is also the most efficient chest compressions. The only bad thing is that it connects to a Lucas-made backboard. So the Lucas-made backboard is right here. You can see this yellow piece. It connects only to this yellow piece, and it's not great when you're trying to transport a victim because the two arches, the arch of the yellow backboard does not fit flush with the arch of any other backboard. So after we narrowed down our search of compression device to the Lucas device, we decided that we needed to find a way to combine the Lucas device to a commonly used backboard, which we decided was the Combi Carrier 2. The Combi Carrier 2 the Combi Carrier 2 is the most used scoop board in Texas right now. It is a scoop type backboard designed, made, and produced by Hartwell Medical. It features a special hinge locking mechanism that allows the paramedics to easily move the patient on a board without causing further harm. So that means that the paramedics can go in and grab their scoop type backboard. They have the patient laying on the ground. They can unlock the backboard and it opens kind of like a claw almost. And they can put it around the feet and then slide it up to the head, snap it closed, and then they're ready to go. So this eliminates the need to have to roll the patient over on their side to then put them on the backboard. It is safer if they have a back or neck injury, and it's a lot easier to use. It's also very lightweight and very strong. It can hold up to 450 pounds. So now that we've decided what we need to do, we need to combine the Lucas and the Combi Carrier. We created a chart of ideas that we need to consider throughout the design and building process. So those included, the main ideas were that it's efficient. It's efficient to use. It doesn't make it super heavy. It doesn't make it difficult to use. It still works. It's still safe. The safety of the product is key. It's a medical device. We are liable for the lives that the paramedics are saving if they're using our technology, so it has to be safe. The versatility of the final product. If we somehow create a way to combine the Lucas device and the Combi Carrier, it cannot take away from the properties of the Combi Carrier. If a person doesn't need CPR, but they still need the Combi Carrier to help move them, if paramedics need to move them on that, they need to still be able to use it as though nothing had changed. And then the last thing was final costs. We want to keep it relatively cheap. We want it to be accessible throughout the United States. Shouldn't be very expensive. From our brainstorming point, we created a decision matrix, which is a way to take each person's idea and rank them based on a set list of our criteria. So those included feasibility of the product, reliability, safety for both the operator and the patient, the efficiency, the ease of manufacture, strength of the product, and then the cost and would it be functional or not. So we took our base ideas and do we think this is going to work? After that discussion, we figured that creating a board that had a connecting rail for the Lucas was the best option. Yeah. So to recap and refresh, the Lucas device is an automated chest compressor that gives patients quality cardiopulmonary resuscitations, which is CPR. It is used so that the paramedics responding to a medical emergency are then hands-free and able to conduct other necessary tasks, such as taking vitals, taking blood, calling an ambulance, calling other first responders that they need, possibly calling a life flight if they needed to. There's lots of other things they have to do. So oftentimes paramedics that come to the scene to a response. It's either one or two of them. So they got to have hands free. There's a lot of things they need to do. So again, the Lucas is more efficient, consistent, and reliable in comparison to manual CPR, and it's overall the best choice, right? So the current paramedic procedure when using the Lucas device is that paramedics will arrive on scene to the call of distress. They will then attach, if the person needs CPR, they will then attach the Lucas device over their chest, positioning the cup over their sternum, and begin the compressions. From that point, they can then assess the full situation and determine if the patient needs to be transported to the hospital for further care, which is almost always yes. If they're going to need CPR, they're most likely going to need to go to the hospital. So when they determine yes, they need to go to the hospital, they then have to take off the Lucas. So the perfectly good CPR device that is saving their lives right now. And so they take that off, and one of the paramedics on scene now has to switch to manual CPR. From then, they have to then grab the backboard or the combi carrier and put the patient on it, all while still doing manual CPR. Then they have to pick them up on the board and carry them to a gurney. So while two paramedics are carrying them to a gurney, the other paramedic is still doing CPR and walking at the same time as they go. From there, they put them on the gurney and remove the backboard. So they take the backboard off, and then they put the Lucas device back on the victim and strap them down. So this takes a long time. So our solution is to design a rail system in a backboard that allows the Lucas device to clip on, which will eliminate the need for the Lucas paired backboard to be used. This negates the need also for paramedics to have to take the Lucas device off the patient during any of the on-site treatment. From then, the new paramedic procedure would be to put the victim straight on the backboard when they get to the scene. They can then assess if the person needs chest compressions. They then put the Lucas device on. From there, if the person needs to get transported to the hospital, they just immediately pick them up on the backboard, set them on the gurney, and they're ready to go. They don't ever have to take the patient off the backboard until they get them to a hospital bed at the hospital. So we made a list of design parameters, the musts and must nots of our product. So it must serve as a strong backing for the compression device. So it has to be stable and strong. The railing itself must be a minimum of 25 inches wide. That is how wide the two arms of the Lucas device are, and there's not much variation from that. Additionally, the backboard must hold a minimum of 400 pounds. That's FDA regulated, must be standard 400-pound backboard. It also must provide an easy slide along the rail for the Lucas device to shift up and down along a patient. So when paramedics are working on different size patients, if they're smaller, they're going to center them more in the middle of the board. You want the center of gravity in the middle. You don't want them to shift or slide off the board. So depending on the size of the person, the suction cup that attaches to the person's chest has to be directly over their sternum. So in order to do that, you don't want to have to move the rail. That's going to take too much time. You're going to want to let the Lucas slide and lock in wherever it needs to go straight over, so it can slide along up or down the board to make sure it's straight over their sternum. The must nots is that it must not break from the force of the Lucas device. So the down force of the Lucas device obviously must not break the board or the railing itself. It also must prevent EMTs from using the backboard. It must not prevent the EMTs from using the backboard as normal when chest compressions are not needed. So it must still function as a regular board if we change the board in any way. And then again, it must not bend when attaching the Lucas device. So no part of this should fluctuate the design, how it works. Should all work the exact same as if nothing ever changed. So the science of parameters, so basically just to test these 400-pound minimums, tensile strength testing is needed. We sent out a survey to various first responders in our area. We got 81 different responses to this survey. The first question was, would you prefer to perform automatic compressions or manual compressions? And 85% of the responses said they would prefer automatic over manual, and 10% were neutral. The second question was, how many paramedics arrived to a regular call, and 95% was 1 or 2 paramedics. The third question is, how quickly should CPR be started on a patient when arriving on scene? 95% of the responses said immediately, and the other another 2% said after it is determined that CPR is needed. The fourth question is the bar graph. It is, how difficult is CPR how difficult is manual CPR when you're transporting the patient to the vehicle or out of the vehicle? So from a range of 1 to 10, 1 being super easy, 1 to 5, 1 being super easy, 5 being very hard. It was 82% actually said it was hard or very hard to do. And then the last question was, how efficient would it be to combine a Lucas device and a backboard? We sent them a little sketch along with it, and over 50% said that they think it would be very efficient. The team then drew up some napkin sketches and kind of got some ideas down on paper so we can kind of start to see what it was going to look like, see some ideas that were either way out there or somewhat reasonable. The one that looked most reasonable to us at the time was probably the middle picture, which incorporated the railings going down the center of the handles. So we tried to stick with that idea in the beginning. So we then were tasked to create a 3D model. So we created a 3D model. Is about 6 inches long, and it was a ½ inch in width. So this was designed to allow this is a clamp that would allow the rail to go through in this small hole, and it's set 2 inches off the board. So that would give us the proper width. Adding 2 inches to both sides would give us proper width of 20.5 inches for the Lucas device. We strayed away from having the railing into the board. We thought that it wouldn't give us enough room to have the patient lay and not be squished by the Lucas device. So we came up with the clamp idea to kind of widen the board without creating an entirely new backboard in itself. So we came up with these clamps, and it allows to just let the rail sit right offset of the board. So if it was clamped right there, you would have your rail running this way, 2 inches from the edge of the board. We came up with a list of materials that we're going to need to start building our prototype. One was a combi carrier, which is the backboard. It was about $1,000. We also needed some aluminum rods so we could make our rails. We needed a couple sheets of plywood, 2x4s, to create our clamps. And then for testing reasons, we needed a Lucas compression device. Thankfully, most of everything was donated. We didn't have to spend the estimated total of $17,000. I think we ended up spending $26 total making the clamps and the plywood, and the Lucas device was donated for testing, and we just returned it that same day. And the combi carrier was donated from a local, from Pearland EMS and Fire. They had an extra one that they didn't need anymore. So our steps to build, we cut a paper template of what we wanted it to look for our clamp, what we wanted it to look like, and we cut it out. We get a very basic cut. So then from there, we cut it in half along the larger hole so that it could clamp onto the board. And then from there, we use screws to hold it in place. For the railing, we sent a CAD file of what we thought our designs needed to look like. to a manufacturer friend of ours who said he would do it for free. Thankfully, he sent our railing through a metal lathe, and to fit the dimensions we needed. When we first started, we only wanted to make a 12-inch piece, to make sure that our dimensions were correct. For testing, to test our clamp, the first stage was to make sure that the clamp had a tight fit on the board's handle, that it wouldn't rotate or anything like that. And then to check the rail and test the rail, we had to make sure that the dimensions fit properly. It could slide up and down if needed to, but also lock in place and not move when it needed to. So before building a full-size rail, we created a 12-inch rail that was made to make sure that the dimensions were correct, because it's very expensive to use the metal lathe and cut these down to size. This 12-inch bar that isn't even finished all the way through is about $250 to make. So when we tested it on the Lucas device, our dimensions were way off. So we had to go back and redesign the dimensions of that. Additionally, when we kind of held the Lucas device up to our backboard, now that we had a Lucas for the first time, we looked to see if we had the right width, and instead of having a 2-inch space from the edge of the board to the middle of the railing like we previously thought, it was actually about a 1/2-inch space between. So then we had to go and redesign the clamp as well. Because the previous clamp was too far from the edge of the board, we cut down the design and made it a lot smaller. The previous clamp had a space from the edge of the board to the center of the railing being 2 inches. The new design had the edge of the board to the middle of the railing being 1/2 inch. The cut down and bringing the rail closer made the weight more centralized and also cut down on the spinning of the clamp. So this picture just shows the difference between our first and second clamp. You can see the difference in size. The tail on the clamp is actually to help for when the downforce of the Lucas device pushes on the patient. It makes the bar pull up, and so the tail prevents spinning the opposite way that we need it to. Additional to the clamp redesigning, we also designed a new bar. We also decided to create a flat edge on the new bar, which allowed the Lucas device to clamp tighter and have a better lock on the bar. So again, in the next slide, you can see the difference in dimensions between our first and second bar. And because they're so different, it allowed the Lucas to actually slide better over the new and improved bar. So we put it all together, the new and improved rail and clamp. We manufactured enough clamps all the same and got the 2 new bars manufactured with the straight edge. We put it all together and went and tested on the Lucas. The new railing fit perfect, and the clamps also worked well. The only problem is that you can see in this picture that the clamps were somewhat twisting under the weight of the Lucas device. So moving forward, we would redesign the clamps. And so if this was to be used in everyday, we'd mass produce, these would not be made out of wood. The clamps would be made out of an aluminum of some sort. We can incorporate a teeth kind of groove factor in the middle of the larger hole that goes around the edge of the board to prevent slippage and spinning. So it would kind of grab into the board itself and not allow it to move at all. Also, from another redesign aspect, you can see in this picture how it is a perfect circle, but our new bar is not a perfect circle, so it does allow the bar to spin through. So to redesign, we would make this circle, that is now a circle, we would make it match the shape of our new bar so that it does not allow it to spin at all. that's all I got. Any questions? Thank you.